seek Jesus, even if you don't think you need him. Many times I find myself saying, Jesus, take the wheel. It's that simple, and because we've had a lot of scary moments, between Sal and Giovanni. Johnny has caused us a lot of scary moments. And I constantly hold my breath, but I have to give it up to the powers that be, because this is their story that they were given. We are all children of Jesus. So Jesus gave us these children. So there's a reason that they're here and they're teaching us the ways.
Welcome to the Light Your Heart with Hope podcast. I'm Erin, and I'm so thankful you're here. My hope and prayer is that through listening to today's episode, God will encourage you and do immeasurably more than all you can ask or imagine. Today, I'm excited to share Lina's story. Her voice resounds with hope and faith in God, even in the midst of the hardest circumstances. She has two amazing sons who share the same disease. Different treatments, different abilities, different personalities, but the same God in control of it all.
I graduated college. I was 22 years old, and I went right into corporate America. I worked in the accounting department, in the payroll department, and I climbed the ladder and became a payroll manager. I met my husband. We'd started dating in 1995, so I'm aging myself now. And we were married in 1999, and I worked very long hours, every day. We saved our money to buy a home. So we lived in Brooklyn, New York, and then we moved to New Jersey. The next step was to become a mom. I always dreamed of becoming a mom. I thought, you get married 22, 23, you have a baby, and life is grand. It didn't go like that. I wasn't, I was married a little bit older. We had our first son, Salvatore, in 2003. So he is miraculously 19 years old, which I could pinch myself for that, because that in itself is crazy, but we could get to that part later. And I continued to work, because we had a home, and, in life, most people need two incomes unless, you can afford one income. So we continued to work. And then I was approaching another year in life, and I said to him, and one was good, Salvatore is what we needed. It was perfect with Salvatore, but I just felt like maybe one more. I knew that I was going to lose my job because they were relocating to Canada. And, I said to my husband, if we are going to try, we should try now. And, God's funny. And we did. We became pregnant instantly. And my Giovanni was due right when I was losing my job. So timing couldn't have been perfect. And I knew then, I would have a couple of weeks off and then look for another job. So my Salvatore is now 5.5 years old and in kindergarten. And I noticed little things about Salvatore, things that didn't seem right. And he had a day off from school. It was a big holiday, so school was closed. And somebody said, "Hey, Sal, how are you?" And Sal was like the little mayor of his school. Like, everybody knew him. He had a great personality. And Sal didn't even look at him and just kept going. He was more interested about getting on the, swing or whatever. So I said, "Oh, he forgot you." Like, I made an excuse, but I felt something wasn't right. I remember school calling and saying he's almost like a student that just was landed in a classroom and English wasn't his language. It was like he was a foreign student in a country and he didn't understand what was going on. And I'm like, because it kind of sounded like Salvatore. Like, he almost wasn't processing, but I didn't know at the time. And I had my little Giovanni that was only 3 months old. So he started having, incontinence issues, and his nurse at the school was fantastic and helped, because she knew I had this little baby with me, and I would drag him and I mean, I just had a baby, so I was going through the whole postpartum thing and, starting a life as a mom of two. And she did wonders, that nurse, and I'll never forget her. The first thing you do is you call your pediatrician. And our pediatrician said, maybe he has a little attention issues. Sounds like ADHD, but just like the attention part, he can't get focused. And, I disagreed with him, but I was like, okay. And the reason I did was because I had a niece who was, severely has ADHD, and I knew these were not the typical symptoms. From there, I declined the medication for Salvatore, not because I was against medication, but I didn't feel right. So I took him to a child psychologist. I guess that would be doctor number 2, and he said he's working through feelings, he's a new brother now. And, so we started therapy. And he too said ADHD because Sal appeared not to have focus. And, he was like a little bit confused. So then the child psychologist sent me to a psychiatrist. He said, it's time now to begin medication. So we walk into the psychiatrist office. And when it comes to medical care, I am calm as a cucumber because those are my children and I need to be calm as a cucumber. Any other aspect of my life, I'm not calm. But when it comes to my children, I know what they're wearing, what they ate, where they were, I needed to. And that was just something that kicked in me. So we walk into the office and my Salvatore begins to touch things. And the psychiatrist was like, you can't touch this. What are you doing? Sit down. And I said, thank you very much. And we walked out because how could a pediatric child psychiatrist tell my son, you can't be touching things? And it was like the weirdest thing. So that was the first time I ever walked out of a doctor's office. And I had gone back to the psychologist. I'm like, where do you send people? Like, it was awful. So then I go back to the child psychologist and Sal continues each week to have sessions. So then at this point now school's over. So I go back to our, pediatrician. I said, okay, let's begin something. So we started medication and I saw no difference. Like, if anything, I felt like it was worse, so at this point now I find, so then I go to a neurologist. This is doctor number 4, because I go to the school and I say that, Salvatore needs to be evaluated because, he just didn't know if he was coming or going. So we needed to get him evaluated so he can have an IEP, and help him learn in school. And it wasn't even learning because his learning score was so high, but he just lacked that attention span. And it wasn't like he was fidgety. He wasn't, presenting as ADHD, but definitely focus was like not there. But like he could be talking about the first person that landed on Mars and they would ask him, at 5 years old, what's 25 times 25? And he'd give you the answer. So it was just strange because he heard them, but he wasn't looking at them. So I guess that's where they thought, he definitely has focus issues. And I would say, well, ask him a question and he would answer. So doctor number 4 diagnosed him with ADHD. So that's another doctor, and repetitive behavior, because this is pre-diagnosis, but children with metachromatic leukodystrophy in the early stages of juvenile will repeat things and have things set in their way. So I'll give you an example of this. Where, in a kitchen, I'm sure your kitchen is the same. You have multiple places to tell time. You might have a wall clock. You have your stove, you have your microwave. So it's 9:03 in the morning. So Salvatore would sit there and look at the microwave and say, okay, it's 9:03. And then look at the stove and say it's 9:03. And then look at the wall clock and say, it's 9:02. And he would stand there and he'd repeat it. So then he would go, 9:03 microwave. The stove would turn to 9:04 and the wall would just turn to 9:03. And he was puzzled because time is time, right? And time should be the same no matter what. And I was like, oh, wow. And he would fixate on that. Light switches, sometimes you have a kitchen or a bedroom, you might have multiple switches where you could turn it up, and turn it on, turn it off. And one switch might be up and one switch might be down. Well, he had a pattern. So it had to either be down and that one had to be up. That one couldn't be down and that one couldn't be up. So he had to have everything synced. Like he was repetitive in his ways. So then I said, okay. So we continued the medication until we got to doctor number 5. It was one night we were in Queens, New York, where my in-laws lived, and we were having dinner, and my Salvatore, little did I know, completely spaced out to the point my father-in-law screamed, Sal, look at grandpa. What are you doing? So I just like tapped him, and I remember kicking my husband under the table because at this point, nobody knew anything. We kept everything quiet, coming from my background, which was pretty strict. You keep your business to yourself. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this. Something happens to your family, you got to keep it quiet, and my parents, drill that in you, like your business is your business. You keep it in your roof, under your roof. So I kicked my husband under the table and I made an excuse that we had to go home. I find doctor number 5 the next day and I explained this, which was a psychiatrist. And he's the one who started selling new medication. And I called him and he didn't say Salvatore had a seizure because he didn't want to alarm me, but he said, you need to go see this neurologist right away. And I guess he must have called because, to get a neurologist appointment is not easy. And we saw the neurologist like very quickly. They order an MRI. And I remember this, that we did the MRI on a Monday. And on a Tuesday, the office calls and says, you need to come in tomorrow at 1:00. It was like a Wednesday. And I'm like, excuse me? And I remember the nurse saying, I'm sorry. She's like, I'm sorry, but you need to come in here right away. The doctor went to the hospital to review the scans, which, is kind of strange because normally, they get a disc, it's not that many years ago. It's still modern, and today is very different. But back then I'm like, what? And she said, yes. In the middle of all this, Sal was still in kindergarten. He stopped writing, and I told my husband, he said, you're crazy, and he was working, and I'm like, your son doesn't write anymore, and I'm home with the 2 kids, and some might think it's like I'm being sleep deprived because how do you forget to handwrite, and how do you forget to go to the bathroom? And it's just things were like, as soon as that door opened up with, even before we knew it was MLD, as soon as things happened with Sal, it happened so quickly and daily things were changing. So on that Wednesday at 1:00, this doctor comes in and tells us he has, I couldn't even pronounce it, metachromatic leukodystrophy, disease. And I go, what? So he says it again. And I'm like, wait, I don't understand. Like, I had Giovanni with me and Sal was in school and he, and he starts saying it's genetic and this and that. And, he tells us that he would call us, to let us know if there's any treatment that, your son's going to die. And we left out of there. Like, I don't even remember where this doctor's office is to this day. I remember the name. I'll never forget the name. And we left and my husband dropped me off and he went to work. And I'm like, what? Like, it was just, I think because we were in shock. So I call my brother, my older brother, and I said, my son has this and I have no idea what this is. And little did I know, he called my younger brother and my sister and my older sister. And I guess they Googled. We had to hit the ground running. I said my husband went to work. That lasted 5 minutes. He came home then because shock, I guess, wore off. And I think as a person, as a human being, as an employee, you said, well, I still got to go provide for my family, right? I mean, he was the only one working, but it didn't last long. He came right home. And okay, we're like, what do we do? And I started Googling, which husband did total opposite. He Googled nothing, and we found out that there's a hospital, Duke University, and, we need to go there. And at this point, it's September-ish, because even though the MRI said that, he had this disease, and looking at his MRI, most MRIs, when you look at them, the brain is nice and coiled. Salvatore looked like, and if you didn't know better, he was wearing a bandana around his head when they took this picture. I mean, it was like the weirdest thing. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with it? And then, how many times you've been in a doctor's office and you see the brain is supposed to be nice and coiled. Well, my Salvatore had this white thing around his entire brain. I guess in the beginning, going back to my parents, they taught us, like you just keep things personal as much as possible. So I was, I guess, a little bit quiet about it because I didn't know what was happening. I was very, very numb. Halloween day, we took Salvatore trick-or-treating. That Halloween night, a family of 4, here we are driving from New Jersey to North Carolina because Dr. Kurtzberg said, you need to come and you need to come now. So we did. And the gates of heaven opened. The rain was pouring down on us. It was a total nightmare driving. I'm not sure why we didn't stop, but we kept going. Giovanni screamed the entire way. Looking back now, it's probably good on his lungs, not back then, thinking about it. But when a baby cries now, I'm always like, good, they're clearing their lungs. That's the medical part of me, Lina. So while we were in North Carolina that week, we went from October 31st to November 7th. And the first doctor we saw was Dr. Maria Escalar. She evaluated both of my children, and we didn't know Giovanni had metachromatic leukodystrophy. Giovanni was 11 months old. When we met her, she told me to take a vacation for Sal to take him home. He does not qualify for a bone marrow transplant, and at the time, this is 13 years that they both transplanted. So, this is 12 years ago in 10 months. She said, take them home, enjoy Salvatore, take him on a vacation, go have a family trip. And, she said this with tears in her eyes. And I'm like, what? And she's like, I can't recommend him for a transplant. The disease will progress. It will just not be a good outcome. She said, but if this person, and she pointed to Giovanni, who was this little feisty 11-month-old, and he's still feisty today, said, if he has a disease, God forbid, he needs to be transplanted. I was like, okay. So we met her first on a Monday. And then Monday night, we had met Dr. Suhag Parikh and Dr. Kurtzberg. Brilliant, brilliant doctor. So they evaluate Salvatore and they're like, no, we could do something for him. And I was like, nah, I'm like, Dr. Escalar said no, like, who are you? Little did I know who they really were. Why would Dr. K tell me this? Dr. Escalar, said no. It's funny the way life goes because knowing today and to this day, and no one ever told me, but Dr. Wegner, when he runs his labs, and Giovanni had his labs done on Monday, oh my God, the blood work that he had done, they run the labs and then by Thursday he runs it. So by Friday morning, whoever the provider is knows. But we left North Carolina on a Saturday and it was November 7th, 2010. That was my 10th year wedding anniversary. So things are funny, and I always make a joke that my husband and I loved each other very much. We were that weird couple that never had a fight. We never had an argument. We always wanted to be together. We didn't understand how people were like, oh, my husband's gone. Oh, my wife's gone. We were that weird couple. Like, we liked each other. We liked each other a lot. So that 10-year wedding anniversary, here we are driving the miles back home, and I believe it was 550 miles, with these 2 kids again. And we didn't know what was installed, but, my husband kept saying, well, if Giovanni has it, we have to do it. But look at him, he's doing all these things that Sal never did. And we didn't know at the time, but like, if you compare like month, you're not supposed to compare 2 kids, but like at 11 months, Giovanni was so feisty and Sal was different. Sal was laid back, but Giovanni's all me and I'm feisty. And, Salvatore is very calm, always was the calmest demeanor, So my husband's like, if he has it, we have to do it. And I kept saying, I can't transplant one child without the other. So my husband said, well, if he doesn't have it, Giovanni, then we do nothing. But, I was with him every day. Like, I just kept thinking like, things were coming out and it didn't make any sense, and from Saturday to that Monday, I guess was 72 hours. I had called Monday morning, and I remember speaking to Jane. She was one of the lead nurses, and she told me, hold on. And I don't know. I said, did Dr. Parikh get the fax? She said, I think she said he did, but he didn't review it or something, or I don't know what she said. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. And this is before I became Dr. Lina in life, because I am a non-medical doctor. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. But it's weird because the first time that diagnosis was Sal, something took over my entire body. And it just felt like I was dying inside. And there's no way in life you could feel that feeling again. There would be no way, like God wouldn't do this to us, and, I had 2 children out of love. Like, why would anybody, do this? So Dr. Parikh came on the phone and said, I'm sorry. And I lost it because I was like, how could this be? How could we again have this? And I said, when do we come? I didn't even talk to Mel, my husband. He said, tomorrow. Oh, and I was like, oh. And at this point, it's November 9th. I think he said Dr. Kirchberg would call. And I remember her calling. And I said, well, Giovanni turns 1 on November 17th. We're going to do this little thing for him. She says, no, you need to come immediately. And I was like, oh, so I don't celebrate my son? She says, you need to come immediately. But, the way it had and the way it was set up, we did wind up being at home, but it was just my parents and us. And drove the day after Thanksgiving on Black Friday. Looking back, I don't know what was wrong with us. Like, why didn't we go Saturday? I don't think time and concept made any sense, because I'm laughing now because nobody goes out on Black Friday and drives south, and, you sit in a room. It was this big conference room, and it was Giovanni, Salvatore, Mel, Dr. Parikh. And then I had my brother Salvatore, his name is Salvatore as well, on the phone. And Dr. Parikh explained this whole thing. And we had to sign basically a life away consenting this. I have no idea what I was signing. And my brother Sal just kept asking question after question to Dr. Parikh. We hung up, and Dr. Parikh's like, you're lucky you have him, because I didn't comprehend anything. And I mean, I'm not, I don't find myself dumb by any means, but, you're overwhelmed, and it's 2 children, 2 totally different courses of treatment. I don't even know how many chemo drugs we went through, times 2. And Salvatore was one of the first 5 children to receive, I put it in air quotes, reduced chemo. There was nothing reduced about his chemo, but it was just a different treatment. And he was one of the first 5 children to ever receive this. Yeah, we were inpatient with 2 children, 2 rooms, 1 day apart. They both received a bone marrow cell transplant via stem cells to unknown donors. There is no way that these 2 children were not protected by Jesus, because the unimaginable that they had was the scariest thing. Going through transplant alone is crazy. And unless you walked in those shoes, there is no explaining it. Forget about the confinement that you have, in a 2x2 room. I had 2 children. My husband worked remotely full time. His job let him. So he would begin work at 7 a.m. and sometimes finish at midnight. And I had 2 kids, 1 in a bed, 1 on top of me, the entire time. I had my parents there, to help during the day when they could, when they were older. I remember the first time, it was Christmas week, the end of December, and Giovanni was to begin this new chemo. And, as the doctor, they have to tell you all the side effects. So Dr. Kirchberg comes in and tells us, everything. And she said, the medication Giovanni's on can cause seizures, but don't worry. We give him whatever the seizure med was. He'll be fine. So I remember, always being confined to that room with the 2 children. And I remember going to the bathroom in the hallway, I went to go brush my teeth. I don't know, change a scene. And like you hear in the movies, you hear this code blue, code blue. And I'm like, what? And I don't know if they said the room number. And I remember coming back, into the room because I told the nurse I was going out or whatever. And she wouldn't let me go in the door. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I remember telling her, like, get out of my way. And she's like, no. And I didn't know what was happening, but Giovanni not only had one, but two big fat seizures. And I'm like, I was just a blur. And my husband describing it like he went completely limp. And the nurse, God bless Marissa, she hit the code blue, and I think she meant to hit the nurse button. So before we knew it, there was literally 30 people in this room, with Giovanni. Talk about fast, talk about moving. Did she have to hit that code blue? She probably had to hit the emergency line, but it's okay, and we all learned. He was protected that day, and then another instance, Sal receives his transplant on January 5th. Giovanni decides that, because they had central lines, that one of his lines was going to basically die off on him, and he needed emergency surgery. So again, my son was protected. Throughout this journey, we had people come and go in our life, and to this day, I still feel alone. I feel alone in many aspects of life, even amongst family. And it's not, their fault, but I have a different life and I don't understand it. I don't understand it a lot of times. I don't understand, why children suffer. I don't understand why teenagers suffer. I don't understand why parents suffer. And I don't even want to begin the amount of funerals I had to attend for children. I'm so numb at times that I think, I can't cry anymore. I don't get it. And my words are not coming out the way I want them to, but it doesn't make sense. And a lot of times, I've said this to many Hunters Hope people, I have almost like a survivor's guilt because my Salvatore was able to be transplanted. And because my Salvatore was able to be transplanted, I always thought, Salvatore saved Giovanni, right? Because Salvatore was diagnosed first. Salvatore has this deadly disease. Giovanni has this deadly disease, all because of two people fell in love. And I always said, well, Salvatore saved Giovanni. And years later, my husband said, no, Giovanni saved Salvatore because Giovanni has this disease too. And my husband always felt that if Giovanni wasn't diagnosed, would we have transplanted Sal? Knowing me, I think I would have. I mean, I want to say I know I would have. I can't go back in time. I don't regret anything I did. But when I see children, babies, that doesn't have this opportunity, and let me be clear, my life is not easy. My children's lives are difficult, but they are happy, they're content, they are stable. They've had their ups and downs. Are they cured? No. Do I still feel guilty? Yes. It's difficult when I go to Hunter Soap Symposium. If I've gone to other Lucrative Fee events, but I've been told by really dear friends that children that now are transplanted, you should not feel guilty. You didn't choose this course. You still have children that their life is not like, and I hate this word normal, because what is normal in life, right? And Hunter, he didn't have the course that my children had, and I don't know. I don't know, like, was God protecting them? Did God say, you know what, Lina, you have two, so I'll give you a choice? Somebody invented transplants, I mean, somebody had to think of it. Yes, it's scientists and people, but their belief has to be bigger and beyond what we could ever comprehend, is helping these brilliant people save children. When a child dies, they're cured, but then the parents' hearts are broken. And there's no medicine for that. There's no saving that. My Salvatore, I say he's my baby, but he's 19 years old. I tell him he's my little boy, but he's not a little boy. He's a man. He's a man. He's got facial hair. He's got a personality. He has not spoken since he's 6.5 years old, but he speaks volumes. The room is so dead silent when he's not home. And again, this has to be Jesus tapping me, because we went to view a school for my other son, and the woman we met there, she said there might be something for Salvatore. She's going to create a program just for him because he doesn't even qualify for this school. Somebody was tapping us on the shoulder, and my husband and I said, imagine they open a program just for him. How cool would that be? That's God whispering in my ear, wait, Lina, wait, because we still don't feel comfortable taking him to school just because of who's sneezing, who's coughing. But this school, we felt comfortable. So we'll see what happens. But Sal has a funny personality. He's nonverbal. He's been nonverbal for over 12 years. He shows his love to us. I mean, there's no question about it. His eyes light up when he sees me. He loves when I kiss him, and I kiss him 1,000 times a day. I hold his hand. I read to him, and he loves me. I know he loves me. But as soon as my husband walks in the room, Salvatore changes completely. They have a secret bond. There is no bond like it. It's called the Big Brothers bond because they're both big brothers, and their love for each other is crazy. They love ESPN together. They love watching sports together. Sal's a Miami Dolphin fan. Sorry, Jim, you know it. And there's no turning back on that. Sal loves his Dolphins. God willing, we're going to take him to a game in Florida soon. He loves his Mets, there's a bond between those two. And I get jealous, and my husband says, stop being jealous, but it's okay. I know Sal loves me until he sees his daddy, I say, and he loves his little brother, and since Sal is nonverbal, there are things he does. Like Giovanni will hold Salvatore's hand in bed because every night Salvatore gets treatments, and that's Giovanni's time with him. So Giovanni holds his hand. Salvatore looks at him. He turns his head a lot. He knows he's there. Giovanni does not stop talking to Salvatore. He knows everything there is to know about Mario and Luigi, and Salvatore just soaks it in. But Salvatore does things. He'll hit Giovanni in the face, and Giovanni screams, and I'm like, Sal, stop hitting your brother. And, it's involuntary, but I think it's funny. Or he'll kick Giovanni, and, Giovanni yells at him. I'm like, can you two stop fighting? It's normal, typical brother stuff. And, he's got a good personality. Like he has a calm demeanor. I guess that's the word, right? He's just so calm. Opposite of me, except when it comes to medical. I always say that, because if there's an emergency, we've had so many emergencies. I'm the one that takes control. I'm the one that drives them to the ER. I'm the one that, speaks to the doctors. I become a different person. I am not a calm person. Anyone that knows me, I'm not nervous, but I speak loud. I'm from Brooklyn. The Brooklyn comes out. But when it comes to the boys, I am so calm, and I take control, and I tell the doctors, this is what they need. And most of the time we listen to each other. Giovanni, I always say this. Sal came out, he didn't cry when he was born. Giovanni came out screaming, yelling when he was born. Giovanni is so feisty, so tough, but he has the biggest heart in the world. And I'm not just saying this lightly. The way he loves his brother, the way he goes to a special school, the way he loves his friends, he doesn't see anyone different than himself. If you're talking, he's your friend. If you're nonverbal, He doesn't care. He's your friend. He knows his friends can either speak with a device or with their mouth. He knows his friends can either walk with their feet or use a wheelchair or use a walker or use a cane. Or one friend, God bless her, she walks with the walking stick. He does not see anyone different. He treats everyone the same. When he loves somebody, he loves so hard, so fiercely. He gives it his all. I was always protecting him because of his stature. He's always been so little, but so tough. And my husband's like, let him be. But I'm always afraid what comes out of his mouth. And now I want people to know what comes out of his mouth. I'm not afraid. He is finishing 7th grade, which is crazy. He will begin 8th grade, his last year in middle school, and he will go to high school. He will go to a special high school. Well, he's going to a regular public high school, but there will be a special program he's in just because he is different, but we're all different. No one is the same. So that's okay. He learns every single day. Does he learn like another 7th grader? No. Is he smart? He is so smart. In my eyes, he's brilliant. Although every day he gets off the bus, I ask him what he learned today. He said nothing much. And I went to their graduation in for the middle school for his friends, and all these things that they learned. And I said to Giovanni, I thought you learned nothing. Well, same old. And that's Giovanni, But what I hear from Giovanni's teachers is that he has compassion, and he always wants to help somebody. He tries to fix people's wheelchairs. He tries to help people. He tries to advocate for them. He's always looking out for them. He's always worried. He doesn't want his friends to get in trouble. He wants his friends to follow the rules. He completed our family. I didn't know I needed Giovanni until Giovanni came. But when my father died, that hit me. He was the biggest cheerleader for my children. He didn't understand the disease at all. He didn't understand any of this, but he always said, why did God have to take away Salvatore's voice of everything he took? And he would tell me this constantly, and I just would absorb it, and cry inside silently because he was right. It didn't make sense. He can't walk. He can't eat by mouth. He needs to be on all these medications. But why did he take his voice? Why did he take his voice? And I would tell my father, I called him Pa. I'm like, Pa, he hears you. He listens. He talks with his eyes. He said, I know, Lina, but I want him to hear his voice. I want him to call me Nonu. And I understood that, and it was hard. I also know that my dad had a few words with Jesus. There's no question about it, because there have been many angels that have passed since my dad passed. And, a couple of them he knew. I feel like he's seeing Joey Angelino, and there's no question about it. And Dylan Flincham. I mean, these two kids, my father knew. He knew Joey in the hospital. He knew Dylan from just, me talking about them. There are so many children I could speak about, and their loss, and all the funerals I went to. And I think because at the end of the day right now, my children are here and they bring me joy. And the reality of them and their life and what they've been through and how they handle it with grace is beyond anything that I could ever explain. If you met Salvatore, you instantly want to kiss him on the cheek and hug him. And I'll let you do it. And the Kellys are known to do that. And Giovanni now will let you hug him, kiss him, I'm sure, but they light up a dark room, and we don't know, we're living here and there's joy to be found here, but I can't even imagine the reunion in heaven that will be. And with everybody, and Giovanni asked me a lot of questions about heaven. As an adult, I don't always understand it, but I tell him, Jesus will find the way for us. I said, it's got to be glorious and beautiful. And he's always asking me what Nonu's doing. What do you think he's doing? I picture my dad having a glass of wine, maybe hanging out with Jesus. I don't know, and watching over all the kids and seeing his family, and I don't know, but it's got to be better than here, right? I mean, this is temporary. Seek Jesus, even if you don't think you need him. Many times I find myself saying, Jesus, take the wheel. It's that simple, and because we've had a lot of scary moments, between Sal and Giovanni. Johnny has caused us a lot of scary moments. And I constantly hold my breath, but I have to give it up to the powers that be, because this is their story that they were given. We are all children of Jesus. So Jesus gave us these children. So there's a reason that they're here and they're teaching us the ways.
If you know Lina's family, you love them. Even though they're Miami Dolphins fans and I'm a huge Bills fan, so there's a little rivalry there. But truthfully, it was such a blessing to hear Lina's story. Sal and Giovanni just light up the room. You can't be around them and not smile or laugh or both. They are a reminder of God's goodness and the joy that can be found in the most unlikely of circumstances. To learn more about Lina's story, check out the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that Lina's story and Sal and Giovanni's life encourage you to share your own story. You matter, your life matters, and your story can make an impact that matters for eternity. Make a difference today for someone who is fighting for their tomorrow.